Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my little mini startup roadshow. I'm here today with one of the first initial investors in Audea, who is Ondrej. Shout out to you, Ondrej. Thank you for being here today. So I'm going to be asking Ondrej why he ultimately invested in the startup today, kind of get his thoughts around the idea, the concept, all that type of stuff, and ultimately kind of the vision and what he sees around the product. So first of all, Ondrej, thank you for being here. Thank you for being one of the first checks. I think you were like the third or fourth person who invested in the startup, which is or the person who said yes to invest in the startup. So it definitely means a lot to me. So first of all, I just want to ask you when I sent you a video, I think initially showing you the pitch that I recorded a couple months ago, what did you kind of see about it that at least triggered you to be like, oh, maybe this might be something worth putting some money into?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first and foremost, pleasure to be here, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. And yeah, as you mentioned, right, when I first saw your kind of initial page and the idea for Audea is that, there are so many ideas kind of floating around, and these days it's so important to get them out and also get people interested in those ideas, right? Because as the ideas are kind of exchanging, especially, not just between the people in maybe like one city or one university, but get it across the borders. So the spoken word is, definitely getting more and more traction, and it's one of the ways how we basically move the society forward, right? Putting the ideas together and then obviously building something on top of them. So it's great that you decided to make this happen and make the world more connected.
Yeah, so I think spoken word ideas, it's interesting because like podcasting as a medium and audio as a medium, I think the pandemic kind of accelerated more and more people listening instead of watching and kind of like being on the go and hearing content, which opened up this new opportunity for all these people to get their content discovered. We saw apps like Clubhouse start to explode. But I think the problem existed which was like, how do we get them actually discovered? As you said, there are billions and billions of ideas that are all existing in the ether. And so the value comes in the curation of those ideas for an audience to actually get those pieces of content discovered. Can you speak to like the curation mechanism in audio? Do you feel like there's a lack of true algorithmic curating of content that actually gets people to find a piece of content in a packaged way and then ultimately consume it? Because and I know like getting people to discover content is like the hardest thing on the planet.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned a good point, right? Because we also reach a point in society where there is almost like too much of an information, or it's hard to basically get a sense of what's happening, right? Kind of untangle all of the threads and make sense of the things, right? So the second part of the equation, the curation of information, is at least as important as getting the ideas out, right? And also connecting the right people to the right ideas and other people. So making these connections happen, that's also the second tricky part.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what Twitter has done for tweets, right? They figured out how to like, okay, you like Palantir tweets, we're going to show you these type of tweets, here's these type of creators, and then those type of creators get discovered for those tweets. YouTube's done that, Instagram's done that. Like, so all these platforms have reached multi-$100 billion valuations, except Twitter, because they suck at monetizing, because they figured out how to like really curate content in a meaningful way. And that's what I think is so special about audio is like people are creating so much audio content. And as you said, there's just so much of it out there, but the lack of like mechanisms to actually get that stuff meaningfully discovered in a particular way, which is a hard thing to do, but the lack of it on a centralized platform really just doesn't exist. Can you speak to some of the competitors? So like when you thought of this product and then you thought of apps like Spotify or Apple or Amazon Music, what is sort of like a differentiating variable to you that kind of differentiates the product from those other audio apps?
Yeah, for me, the thing is, if we are talking, for example, podcasts, right, they are usually very long format content, and there's definitely a place for that one as well. But, personally, when I, for example, go and listen to a podcast, I would like to go through a whole episode, right? It means I need to somewhat schedule it and, ideally bundle it with some other activity I'm doing, could be some exercise, some house chores or something like that. So there is definitely a possibility to also get like kind of the more shorter content and
hyper specific content.
Yeah, specific and streamlined, right? Almost if we go in like the written format, Twitter is amazing that specifically because it's such a short barrage of information, basically the headlines, but it can give you a super crisp idea what's happening. So of course, there is just different kinds of format and different lengths as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing about Spotify and Apple that I think it was interesting to most investors for why they invested was like, so for example, Tom Nash and ticker symbol U from Alex, they're investing, and I said ticker symbol U from Alex from ticker symbol U. Sorry about that, Alex. They both get like call it 100,000 views a week on their YouTube content, right? They're pretty big finance creators, and when I pitched them the product, they kind of instantly got it. Because their argument was like, we post audio versions of our videos on Spotify and Apple, and it goes nowhere. And it's like, okay, hold on. Why is it going nowhere? Like, why is it like, if you get 100,000 people to consume you on one platform, why aren't at least 100 consuming you on another platform? And the number, and when they mentioned this to me, I was just so shocked, and it made so much sense to me because the platform's not recommending them. It's like, unless you push your audience to go listen to you on another platform, which, I mean, it's kind of hard to do to get people off platform sometimes, then you're just not going to get consumption on another platform. It's like why some TikToks have 800,000 views and then the same YouTube short has 8 views. It's like the same content, but posted on a platform that has a different algorithmic discovery mechanism to get that content discovered fundamentally changes everything. So I think that's the other big thing. It's like, if some of the big platforms aren't actively recommending content for whatever reasons and we can talk about some of those reasons, then it's hard to get discovered.
Yeah, definitely. Because what the creators are usually doing is that they have like the main platform where they kind of blew up, and then they need to channel their audience maybe to a different platform if they need to, right? But it's not like the new natural source of a new people, new consumers. So the world is still a little bit disconnected, right? And I mean, obviously there is an incentive for the platforms to keep people on their specific platform.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting to me because it's like so Alex from ticker symbol U, I think probably some of the most phenomenal deep dives into content. You would think an app like Spotify is like, hey, we have a bunch of people that are listening to on Spotify that care about finance. We should probably show them this content. And it's like, why is that not happening? And then you dive it a little bit deeper and you realize, oh, wait, they paid $100 million for Joe Rogan, right? And they're not a bad company. None of these companies are bad. It's just their business models are rooted in this subscription-based revenue, which means if you have the subscription-based revenue, it's much more difficult to get average people discovered because you don't make any money off those average people. YouTube can make God knows how much money off of Tom Nash because they can sell an ad against him. Spotify's really not in that business. Amazon, Apple, they're not in that business. So if you're not in that business, the discovery mechanism for creators, which creates a mutual beneficial relationship between the platform because they can make money off of you and the creator because they can get discovered by the platform's audience, doesn't exist if the business model is all revenue-based, subscription-based, kind of like Netflix-based, right? Average chess creators aren't going to get discovered on Netflix because you have Queen's Gambit, and that's the premium content that Netflix wants to promote. So I think it's interesting. How do you feel about user-generated content? Like, do you think the next 10 years are going to be kind of dominated by larger media companies or more average people that are trying to make a name for themselves?
Yeah, and I would almost see it as the combination between the two, right? That there is, in my opinion, going to be much more kind of the smaller media companies in a sense, or maybe like individuals almost transforming themselves into the media companies, right? So it's something in between, because lots of the big media houses little bit discredited themselves in a sense. Obviously over the past couple of years there's been a lot of polarization in the society, and the traditional media are not used to use social media, right? So there was little challenge for them because they are still paid by the same advertisers they used to work with before. So we've seen this, for example, in the finance world, right, where usually if there is anything mentioned about Tesla, the traditional media are putting the negative spin on it because the traditional automakers are advertising on their platform, right? So it's a little bit conflict of interest there. And lots of the quality research actually comes from people that are at least somewhat independent, or their incentives are not aligned with anyone.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, and I think you're correct. Big media companies are not like going to die or go out of business or anything, but they will have to sort of flip the script. And I think that's why if you are a journalist that has 100,000 followers on Twitter, you will probably get a higher salary from Bloomberg versus if you're a journalist who has like 20 years of experience but zero social capital. It's like your content will be good, but if it's not going to get if you can't distribute it anywhere, then it's a lot more harder for the content to get discovered. In the context of you mentioned individuals becoming the marketing strategy. So part of the marketing strategy around Audea is to take me as the brand, Amit, and build a narrative and infrastructure and sort of cohesive idea around the concept of Amit being so in love with his journey of building a startup and getting people to sort of feel that emotion and that passion of what it means to build a startup, along with why this idea is relevant in the whole concept of creators getting discovered. I don't think you can make an advertisement and then just put that in people's feeds. I also don't think you can just make one video and hopefully it goes viral. There has to be sort of this consistent content strategy, which means not hundreds, but thousands of pieces of content, articulating and crafting this narrative and this idea around the individual, which leads to the actual product. Can you speak to the individualistic marketing strategy and why that might be like something that could work over the next 10 years?
Yeah, definitely, because that kind of ties with our previous theme, right, of this media company versus individual, where actually what some of the smart media companies of like the mid-size, let's say, are doing these days is that they're almost like acquiring individuals, right? We've seen it very recently, for example, basically Jordan Peterson joining the Daily Wire Plus, or Patrick Bet-David and his Valuetainment acquiring Jedediah Bila. And this basically, there is like this one famous personality that joins the team and works with them, but still basically as their individual brand, right? So people still connect with that individual, right?
Right.
And it's not that much about connecting with the company and this like almost like imaginary or shadowy entity, but really connection person to person.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. The Daily Wire Jordan Peterson stuff was fascinating to me because Peterson, you could argue, is a media company in and of himself, just with the sheer amount of content that this guy is able to, because he's a clinical psychologist. He has so many years of experience. He can speak on so many different issues. And the Daily Wire is kind of like a Netflix for a different type of media in their world. And so the two coming together gives Peterson a ton of infrastructure to be able to create content at an even, more, at a bigger speed. But also he gets to remain as the individual brand. And that's why people care about the media company, because he's the brand. I mean, it's no different than Netflix acquiring, or, let's say Spotify one day acquired Justin Bieber exclusively. That probably would never happen. But if they did, I mean, like, you got Justin Bieber on your platform, that's a big deal. So I think what that points to is that there is an attention shift in our economy where people don't want to buy from a Netflix or from a Daily Wire. They want to buy from a Jordan Peterson who's associated with a Daily Wire. And that allows the transaction of money to actually go to the end company, which is what we're doing with me, right? Like, I don't think people are going to want to download Audea just for the hell of it. They're going to want to download a product to support and try and check out what the individual who they hopefully fall in love with through a meaningful content strategy gets them to care about it at the end of the day. How do you feel about product versus distribution? What are your sort of raw thoughts around that concept?
I mean, it's always tricky to put the quality content out, right? Because there is actually quite a lot of skills that are required for the creators that needs to be mastered. And because it's definitely lots of the soft skill, right, that they need to communicate their idea. But at the same time, there is so much that people usually don't see, right? If they are only consuming the content, there is so much kind of wiring in the background that needs to be put in place, and also, as you mentioned, distributed across different platforms. Make a choices, what platform are we using, if we are basically channeling the people from one platform to another, if our content is more suitable for one platform or another. So there are so many decisions that need to be taken, and once the content gets to you, there has already, it's been a curated experience in a sense.
Right. And if you curate on specific platforms in a specific way that's native to those platforms, then I think there's a much better chance to get discovered as well. Okay, last couple questions. Number one, how did you think of the risk reward scenario in this investment? Like, knowing that most startups fail, 90% of them, and you may lose your money, how were you kind of calculating, okay, I might lose my money, but like if this works, then can you just walk me through what you thought about during that process?
Yeah, I mean, for me, in investing in like an individual startup is very, very new experience. However, I've been investing in the public markets for about 5 years at this point, meaning that I have certain mental model in my mind where it comes to like a risk reward. And of course, as you mentioned, now when we are talking about investing in individual startup, that's often quite a binary bet, or we know the statistic. There is usually maybe like out of 10 there is one winner, 5 complete wipeouts, and 3 4 that goes nowhere. So of course, when investing in startup, it's mostly about the idea and the team behind the idea, right? If they have the vision to actually carry this through over the next at least 3-5 years, if there is a plan in place to basically get it from that initial point all the way to the final outcome, right? And in the case of startup, it's really a long journey with lots of decisions to be made along the path, compared to the public markets where it's much easier to make any kind of prediction.
So you said 9 out of 10 fail. Why do you think I could be the 1 out of the 10 that wins?
Well, mainly because I've seen you on YouTube, right? And obviously, since I've been in the space to some extent, I know how much hard work there is behind a successful YouTube channel, or any type of people that have the tenacity to actually produce content at such a pace. So basically, when I saw your work ethic and combine it with the idea, for me that those were the 2 check marks that are like the prerequisite to actually make it happen.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that's pretty much what every other investor said. It was like kind of seeing that work ethic and then taking a chance that the idea could be propelled by someone who is going to just really work hard to hopefully make it happen. So yeah, that's pretty much it, Ondrej. Thank you so much. My last question for you is, what is your advice to me as I go on this journey over the next 5-6 years? What is one piece you want to leave me with to remember?
Take a good care of your team, right? Because those are the people that you will now spend a lot of time with, and you need to kind of lift them with you and exchange as much as skills with them as possible, right? Because we all have a different experience, and each of us have a little bit to contribute.
I love that. I love that. That's what you're one of the first people that said actually take care of your team. Because those are the people that you got to ride and die with, right? And if they don't feel safe, if they don't feel comfortable, if they don't feel like they can become, leaders on their own one day, lifting them up, right? Then it's going to be hard for the entire team to succeed. So makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much, Ondrej. I appreciate you so much. You were one of the first checks into the company, gave me a lot of confidence to keep going with this, and it means the world to me. And hopefully we see in 5 years what happens. So I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the opportunity.